This is the case of Daniel and Lily, two innocent children whose lives were stolen by the very people who were supposed to protect them, their parents, Mark and Sarah Turner. What investigators uncovered inside their Maplewood home became one of the most disturbing cases of child abuse ever recorded. A story of control, cruelty, and survival that still shocks people to this day. Before we begin, make sure you stay active on my channel for more true crime documentaries like this one. Don't forget to subscribe and support the channel so we can keep uncovering stories that deserve to be told. Maplewood was the kind of place people described as peaceful. It was small, quiet, and filled with families who believed nothing truly dark could ever happen there. That belief was shattered on a bitterly cold evening when a neighbor glanced out their window and noticed something strange. A small boy, barefoot and trembling, was stumbling down the empty street. His clothes were thin and ripped, his skin covered in bruises that looked both old and new. His lips were blue from the freezing air, but he made no sound. He didn't cry out, he didn't knock on any doors. He simply kept moving forward with an empty, haunted look in his eyes. When police arrived, they approached him carefully, but the boy didn't answer a single question. He only lifted a weak hand and pointed back toward the very end of the cul-de-sac, where a small house sat in silence. To anyone passing by, the house looked like all the others. A trimmed lawn, curtains neatly drawn, car in the driveway. Nothing about it suggested what was inside. The officers expected to find perhaps a case of neglect or a domestic argument. What they were about to uncover was far worse than anyone could have imagined. The boy was taken into emergency care, while other units rushed to the house he had come from. Every step closer brought a growing sense of unease. Neighbors, shocked at the commotion, gathered outside, whispering in confusion. They had never seen the children play outdoors, but no one thought much of it. Now, as the police knocked on the door, silence pressed down on the street. The door creaked open, and with it, the ordinary image of Maplewood began to unravel, exposing something deeply sinister hidden in plain sight. The moment investigators stepped into the house, they realized something was terribly wrong. The air was heavy, damp, and smelled of mold mixed with rot, as if the place hadn't been cleaned in years. Darkness swallowed the rooms, with thick curtains nailed shut so no light could enter. The living room, which should have been a warm family space, looked abandoned. The carpet was stained, furniture torn, and walls covered with grime. But the real horror was in the details. Bedroom doors had locks fixed on the outside, not the inside, turning them into cages rather than safe spaces for children. Officers opened one of the rooms and found only a stained mattress lying directly on the floor. No blankets, no toys, no signs of normal life. Another room revealed piles of broken plastic toys, snapped in half as though they had been destroyed in anger. In the kitchen, cupboards were nearly empty, except for expired cans of food and bottles of water stacked in one corner. What struck investigators most was how deliberate everything felt. It wasn't just neglect, it was control. Every locked door, every missing comfort, seemed like part of a system designed to keep children hidden and powerless. The basement was the most disturbing part of the search. Down a narrow staircase, investigators found a space that looked more like a dungeon than a family storage area. In the corner was a crude cage-like structure made from wood and wire, barely large enough for a child to sit inside. Ropes hung from the walls, and the floor showed scratch marks, as though someone had desperately tried to claw their way out. The house appeared ordinary from the outside, but behind closed doors, it had become a prison, and the signs of long-term abuse were everywhere. When officers searched deeper into the house, they found that the boy who had escaped wasn't alone. Hidden in one of the locked rooms was his younger sister. She was only 6 years old, sitting silently in the dark with her knees pulled to her chest. The room was bare, no window to let in light, no bed to rest on, only a thin sheet on the floor. Her small frame was shockingly frail, and she looked as if she hadn't eaten in days. When she tried to stand, her legs trembled so badly, she could hardly stay upright. Doctors who later examined her said she was severely malnourished and had old injuries that had never been treated. Both children carried scars, burns, and fractures that spoke of years of torment rather than isolated incidents. As investigators searched, they discovered something even more chilling. Hidden beneath a loose floorboard in one of the bedrooms were several notebooks. At first, they looked harmless, like the journals of any ordinary family, but inside were disturbing records written in neat handwriting. Page after page detailed punishments, lengths of confinement, and cruel lessons forced onto the children. The writings described times when food was withheld, when silence was demanded, and when the children were locked away for hours without water. These weren't simple notes, they were logs, as if someone was tracking the pain step by step. The reality became clear. The abuse wasn't random or fueled by sudden outbursts. It was organized, methodical, and intentional. The children weren't just neglected, they were controlled in a system designed to break them. Reading those journals gave investigators a window into the nightmare the siblings had lived through, one that no child should ever have to endure. The parents of the children quickly became the center of the investigation. From the outside, they appeared like any other couple in their late 30s. Neighbors described them as polite but distant, the kind of people who kept to themselves and avoided small talk. They waved when passing by, but never invited anyone into their home. For years, no one suspected anything unusual. The family car was always in the driveway, and the curtains never moved. But in a quiet neighborhood, this went unnoticed. When police uncovered the reality inside, the image of an ordinary family crumbled instantly. Interviews with acquaintances revealed a pattern of strictness that bordered on obsession. The parents held strong beliefs about discipline and control, claiming that children needed to be sheltered from outside influence. Behind closed doors, that belief twisted into something cruel. They created a world where every rule was absolute, every mistake met with punishment, and every act of rebellion crushed. In their minds, this was not abuse, it was parenting. They convinced themselves they were raising their children to be strong, but what they were truly doing was inflicting trauma that would last a lifetime. When questioned, their lack of emotion unsettled everyone in the room. They didn't deny what was found inside the house. Instead, they justified it, insisting they had done nothing wrong. To them, the notebooks filled with punishments were proof of structure, not cruelty. Their coldness made the case even harder to process. These weren't parents overcome by anger or struggling with neglect. They were calculated, detached, and unrepentant. The horror wasn't only in what they had done, but in how calmly they defended it. The very people meant to protect those children had become their greatest source of pain. When the case went public, it shocked not only Maplewood, but the entire country. News outlets reported every new detail, and people struggled to understand how something so horrific could take place in a quiet suburban home without anyone noticing. The trial that followed revealed even more disturbing truths. Medical experts testified that the children were on the edge of organ failure due to long-term starvation. Psychologists explained how isolation and constant fear had left deep psychological wounds. The siblings had been living in conditions more like prisoners of war than children in a family home. Each testimony painted a picture that was almost too painful to believe. The courtroom was packed each day with locals who wanted answers. Many of them had passed the house hundreds of times, never realizing what was happening behind its walls. The parents sat expressionless throughout most of the proceedings, rarely reacting to the evidence. When the guilty verdict was announced, the community felt relief, but also guilt. How could such obvious signs have been missed? The silence around that house had allowed years of abuse to continue unchecked. For the children, the end of the trial marked the beginning of a long road to recovery. They were placed into the care of foster families with special training for trauma victims. Slowly, they began to eat properly, to sleep without fear, and to learn what it meant to be safe. Even so, doctors warned that the scars would never fully disappear. Their bodies would heal faster than their minds, and the emotional damage would follow them for years. This case became more than just another story of cruelty. It was a reminder of how evil can hide in plain sight, and how silence from a community can sometimes be just as dangerous as the abuse itself.